Good afternoon and hello. I am Nancy Sheed of Sheed Communications, and I am very excited to be speaking today with George Stevens, who is the chief designer, founder, owner, operator, right, of everything G Sharp Design. And today we're going to be speaking with George about book design. But I first want to say, welcome, George. Really happy to have you here. And I always start with give us a little tell us what you do, but more importantly, I like the story of how you got to this place. So I'm going to leave it to you to kind of do your own intro and tell us the journey.
All right, great. Well, thanks for having me, Nancy. It's really nice to be here. Yeah, so as you so nicely put, I'm the guy wearing all the hats at G Sharp Design. It's a I'll say actually book design practice, and I'll get to why that's important in a little bit. But yeah, so I've been guess you could say I've been a functional graphic designer for about 20 years. Of course, that does date back to when I was in high school doing page layout for my high school newspaper. So it was really where I first dabbled in graphic design. And, funny enough, I'm using some of the same programs and tools and shortcuts today, but kind of set me on the track and went to college for journalism with a focus on graphic design, right? So they opened a track like my sophomore year. It was perfect. That was graphic design, within journalism. So when I graduated, I knew I didn't really want to get into actual journalism. I didn't really want to get into newspapers or anything like that. But I did find this opportunity with a publisher, which sounded like the perfect application of, my skills and sort of with a practical, tilt to it. Now it was a startup. So I was the sixth of six people, right? So
Wow.
my first day, it was a very, it was like a definitive startup. So my first day, they pretty much said, welcome to the team. Here's a phone number. Call this guy. He needs a book cover, right? So there was very little on the job training.
No onboarding. No, this is our culture. Here's
right.
your
I mean, not really. Not really. It was everybody was kind of just paddling, as fast as they could to keep things just get things moving. Everybody was kind of a domain specialist. And, there was not a traditionally structured creative hierarchy, right? So I didn't have a creative director. I didn't have a art director or anything like that, which, probably, there were negatives to that, right? It might have stunted my growth a bit as a designer. But the good thing was there was instant autonomy. I had to learn very quickly how to kind of handle my business and also how to work directly with clients, which was huge. And actually something I lamented at the time because a lot of my classmates were working these, behind the scenes design jobs where they had project managers and they were actually screened from the client.
Yeah.
And I kind of, back then I longed for that, but really it was the best thing that could have happened to me because I was forced to, a big part of success in graphic design, I believe, is, understanding the individual for whom you are designing and understanding their personality and their goals and all these things that will, manifest into great design. So it was important for me. And also, it meant I had to kind of develop a thick skin and all these sorts of things that every designer should have, right? Which I did not have when I started. So it was good to have. So anyway, I stayed with that publisher for 11 and 3/4 years. So and the reason
that's like a lifetime in startup years.
Yeah, exactly. And people wonder how I stayed there that long. And the answer is because the company kept growing and growing. So every time, I needed this sort of professional growth in my career, that a new layer developed around this company and I was able to move up. So, I started at junior designer and then, they took the junior away. So it's just and then, senior designer and then creative manager. And then, all of a sudden there was a directorial layer. So, in my last few years there, I was serving as creative director and I had a team working for me that was larger than the entire company when I started. So there was 7 people on my team. And I think when I left finally, there were, I think, about 80 some people on the team. So it was a very unique experience to be along for sort of that kind of growth curve. But truly, I've always wanted to work for myself. And it was just a good moment in my life. This was 2019. So I was under a year married and no kids at that time. And, my wife and I talked about it and she just said, go for it. This is the time to do it. So I did, and in summer 2019 started G Sharp. At the time, I was just kind of starting it as a design kind of
Firm.
generalist firm. Exactly, one man show. I was doing books, yes, but also branding, event posters. We talked about a little bit. Uh, Various and sundry design things.
Right.
People. I had an okay network of freelance already. And I knew that was going to just be a starting point. I had to build on that, but I had like little stuff trickling in, and then found some inroads with publishers and that sort of thing, and all that led up to in the past 6 months or so recognizing that really book design is where my passion exists, and where I'm getting the most traction and just kind of feel the most comfortable and confident operating. So within the past month, kind of pivoted, at least kind of gave my website a facelift. So now
Right.
I'm positioned as a book design shop, and I'm specifically working with self-publishing authors, although that's not exclusive, but I generally am working with self-publishing authors, which is a market that I'm really interested in, and I think it's a fascinating growing market, and so that's where I am now, and it's a great place to be, and as you know, I'm a new dad as well, so that's kind of coloring everything I do now. That's just adding to this fun balance of being an entrepreneur, sole practitioner, and and I love it. I wouldn't go back, and hopefully I don't have to.
I love that, and that segues really, nicely. Several things. One, congratulations. Two, I think the other part, one of the questions I had before we get to it, just teasing out, like as you grew to creative director's role, right? Did you get further away from the clients and more into management and less into having those conversations, or were you still part of it in terms of helping set the vision and then guiding the junior designers? What did that look like? I'm just curious, now that you're kind of back in the one-on-one, what did that look like from a creative director
Yeah,
perspective?
that's such a great question, because I think creative director is a title that means something different in a lot of
Right.
places. In fact, so much so that I deliberately did not call myself a creative director when I
Okay.
started G Sharp, because I didn't want there to be any confusion as to what I did. So, my title is owner and graphic designer, right?
Right.
So to answer your question, it was more of an administrative role. I mean, I was still doing work, right? I was kind of cherry picking, I guess, as I could, or I was
Repeat
jumping in.
clients come back, or
Yeah, exactly. That
certain
might,
caliber.
or just damage control, or just like we need all hands on deck because we're getting slammed. I would go in and take something, right?
Okay.
But to your point, I was going to a lot of meetings, and I was reporting on numbers, and I was doing evaluations and all these things, which was great experience. And I'm glad that I had it. But part of the reason that I wanted to go, back, or I guess start working for myself, is because I miss being in the trenches.
Nice.
And I missed just that one-on-one, like you were talking about, and having that just direct touch on all the projects. So while I did have creative input, and I was, I think our format was kind of, as I mentioned, it was autonomous. Like we
Right.
empowered our designers to not need to bounce everything off me and run everything through me. That's just how we were structured. But I did miss certainly the creative touch on a lot of things, and thankfully, in this new role, that's all I do. So
Right.
it's good to
Well,
be
and
back.
I think I would assume those startup days hopefully informed you launching your own business, that maybe cut away some of the lessons that some people have to learn, right? Because you were so sort of bootstrapping at that point. I think that's the other big piece that keeps people from starting their own companies. And we're going to talk about book design, I promise. But I think that's the
Awesome.
other part, is that whole process of bringing on your client and working with them in a creative process, and getting them, this is where your role and my role overlap, like comfortably to this other side of promoting themselves or their product, and that process. And so I would assume you didn't maybe have to learn as many steps as you went on your own, getting back to that grassroots piece,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I think really every stage of, again, I said it was a unique opportunity to be along for the growth curve of this company that I was at, and um, I think that I took lessons from kind of every phase it was in.
Right.
Those early phases certainly, but even later on, when I was in more of an administrative role, and I was having to, have the bigger conversations and that sort of thing. That has really helped me, I think, aim a little bit higher with what I do and have some confidence, I think, because I think, as you know, when you're a sole practitioner, you are, you're not just doing the primary function. You're also like the salesperson. You're the,
right.
You're the
admin, tax lady,
bookkeeper, yep,
exactly.
all that stuff. So I think having some experience in all these different corners would proved very, very valuable. And I mean, I would, to the point that if there are any young designers watching this that want to go out on their own, but the best advice I could give you would be go work somewhere that's established, even if it's not like a creative firm. If somebody needs a staff designer, sponge up all the different corners of what a functional breathing company does,
right?
Because it will really set you up for success when you go to start your own endeavor, because you just have to be able to address all those different corners.
I like that you threw in the word functional. That is a key. That was very strategic, and I hope that anybody listening to that advice picks up on it, because not all operating small businesses are functioning. Yep. That's a whole nother interview process. So you made this pivot. You made the pivot, or you put your sort of stake in the ground with the book design, which I love. But I think I want to kind of explore, and that segues into like how George was, for those people who either aren't in the book world or might be thinking about it, like how is it, how is book design different, right? Like I think there are a lot of assumptions made, and I have to say, before I started working with some self-published authors, I was like, what do you mean? You just get somebody who can design something, right? So what does that look like from your perspective? And it may look different from the actual, author, but for you, how is book design different, or how do you explain it to somebody when they say, well, what's the difference?
Yeah, I think, I think every strain of design has its own kind of flavor to it. And I think what defines book design is that it's sort of equal parts. And actually, let me qualify this. I specifically work in the nonfiction realm. I've done some fiction.
That's why we're here.
Sure, exactly.
We're not in fantasy genre and
right.
vampires or kids books or anything else. We are in the nonfiction, delivering interesting information that help people change lives.
Thank you. You said it so perfectly. That's why you're doing what you do. But yeah, so I think with nonfiction book design, right? So we're getting very niche-y. It's this sort of balance of the subjective and the objective that, from a design perspective, that's sort of the task at hand, and okay, so I'm really just kind of speaking to the cover design here, but to pull back a little bit, book design is complex. And I think that is maybe something that every author needs to understand when they go into it, that it's not just sort of this transactional, I need somebody to make me a thing and give it to me and I'll give them money.
I need the pretty part of my book done, right?
Exactly, right. I think that what they need to understand is that it is sort of this like holistic, comprehensive and complex process, right? It is you could kind of chart it out to where, it's like, okay, we need to start doing this. Then the book cover is going to be designed, and that's going to inform, of course, the jacket, but it's also going to inform the layout. And then, the layout's going to roll out like this. And it's not as simple as exporting a Word document. I think that there's, one of my goals, my driving goals in, doing what I'm doing, and one reason I'm so thankful to be able to talk to you today is it's not just, being a book designer and being successful, that it's also kind of educating the market, because I think that there is a serious perception issue when it comes to, well, first of all, I think graphic design, there's a very homogenized view of graphic design.
Right.
I think that the average consumer thinks like, oh, how often somebody's like, oh, you're a graphic designer, can you build my website? Which a lot of graphic designers can. That's not what I do.
I know, but can you make me a logo, right?
Can you make me a logo? Can you build
I need a rebrand. I need a logo.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and there are, like I said, when I got started, I was kind of doing that generalist thing. But there are logo designers who make me weep because of how good they are. We were talking off camera a little bit about concert poster design. Right. I mean, there are specialists in every field of every kind of track of graphic design. Same goes for book design, but also I think there's also tiers of like in anything, there are more experienced designers, there are newbies. And I think with graphic design, you have to acknowledge that there's a very low barrier of entry to becoming a graphic designer. So, you have to be careful with, oh, you know, this guy said he's a graphic designer, so he's going to do my cover. I mean, Nancy, we could get off this call and you could go download Photoshop and you're a graphic designer. I mean, there's no regulating body. There's no credential. Right. Like, you can just be a graphic designer.
I'm a Canva girl. I can't even do Photoshop. It's like, I'm so like not a qualified graphic designer.
Yeah.
Like, Canva.
And look, there are graphic designers who operate in Canva. I mean, I used to, there was bless her, she's a very, very sweet woman I worked with at my old company, who is the front desk person. And she was chatting with me one day. She goes, yeah, you know, I actually do graphic design kind of on the side. And I said, oh, really? You know, what kind of stuff do you use? She's like, oh, I just use this app that creates like social media graphics. Right. And that's fine. I mean, good for her. She's getting some side hustle there, but it's a very different, it's just so different than, you know, what, like if you're looking for a designer to do a full build out of a book or a full website or for a logo suite or whatever it is, branding suite. So yeah, I think that is a very important thing for the consumer to understand, is that there is, you know, not every graphic designer is doing the same thing. Not every graphic designer is made the same. And you know, I think with book design, you want somebody who not only understands, you know, the practical, right? How to actually do it well, but they also understand that, I think a book designer, specifically in the self-publishing realm, is kind of this really important conduit, you know, because when I'm working with somebody, I'm not just designing their book, you know, I'm effectively their project manager, you know, I'm also
at a certain point in their project, right? Like,
of course. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. And, you know, I define the scope when we get to know each other and we, you know, set our project up. But at the same time, there's just certain things that I'm going to take upon myself, because I feel that is just part of great book design.
Right.
So I'm going to I'm going to make sure this project flows. I'm going to set deadlines for us both. You know, I'm going to carefully explain to you these different things. I'm going to, you know, one big thing is when I'm working with entrepreneurs, I like to reduce touch points, right? Because entrepreneurs do not like 700 emails in their inbox, because they've already got 700 emails. So I'm going to be autonomous, because I've done this a lot. I know when to contact you. I know when to just make the decision on my own, and explain my work later if need be. Also, I think one thing about a great graphic designer, or book designer rather, is you do have these sort of inroads with all these other supporting acts. Like, you know, somebody says, I need a PR person. Great. I know Nancy. I need a proofreader. Great. I've got you. I need, you know, whatever. I can connect you with all these people. So, you know, we can dig down deeper into what makes book design great, and maybe we will. But I think that one thing that I would want to convey to everybody, or anybody who's an author and trying to understand the value of a really great graphic designer, it doesn't just start and end at like, oh, their portfolio looks nice, you know, or, oh, they're cheaper than this guy. You know, there is value that extends far beyond that. And I think it really, the lesson here is really vet your resource before you connect with them, before you decide to hire them on. Don't just, you know, say, oh, you've done a book before. Great. You're my designer. Look, I've gotten work that way before. So I'm kind of pulling the rug out under myself here, but I just do really think it's important. You're going to get more out of the process if you know exactly, you know, what to look for, and you fully understand that this is not a quick and dirty process. I mean, it should take some time, and it does ask quite a bit of the author, in my opinion, but the results, I think a well-designed book, I believe firmly, will pay for itself.
100%. So George, you've given a bit of an overview to the process, and you talked about educating the author. Can we dive in just a little bit about like your process in terms of, you know, because again, I come into part of their process, you know, as they have worked with you, but they've obviously kind of done the editing. And sometimes, as we know, parts of these, you know, overlap, right? So, you know, it's not like you work with the editor first and then you come to do your book design. You know, there's lots of kind of overlaps in that chart. But without diving into your whole process or your whole timeline, I'm assuming you have some, you know, kind of onboarding and or intake, right? Like, what are your goals of this book and those sort of things. And then to your point, I don't think, like, again, we've talked about these other pieces, right? Like it goes beyond the cover. Like, what are these other deliverables as a book designer that I think sometimes authors know they're getting or they don't know they're getting? You know, that's the whole formatting, or how you cutting around the ISBN. You know, and then I know with our project with shout out to David Wells that we came back and we're like, could you create these social media graphics for us? What are those? What does that kind of either process or timeline or deliverables look like? Again, is that educating people what you're going to get when you work with an awesome book designer like you?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Just to start, I'm going to lead into this, but I think it's really funny when people talk to me. One of the first things they say is, I don't want my book to look self-published, which really speaks to a perception issue with graphic design as it pertains to self-publishing, right? Like, they don't say I don't want to look cheap or tacky, or it's like I don't want to look self-published. Well, self-publishing is great. It's like let's change that conversation, right? So part of why I'm doing what I do is to try to put a better face on self-publishing, I think. So and one way of doing that is to have this really kind of robust process that I can explain to people. And so, I won't spend too much time on it because we could spend an hour on this. But my, generally speaking, my process, once somebody has agreed to work with me, there is some kind of information mining that happens up front, right? So I actually have developed this questionnaire that I send out to everybody I work with. And it just says like, hey, give me some baseline information about you. Like part of it is just getting it on the record. What's the title of your book? What do you want your name to say on the front cover?
Right. What are the visual assets, right?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
What do you hate? What do you love?
Mm-hmm. Right. And one thing that I don't ask people, and I think if a designer asks you this, you should, it's a red flag, which I'll never ask, what do you want on your book cover? Right. That's not your job to tell me. I might ask, hey, do you have any ideas you want to spitball?
Right.
Anything like front of mind that you're like, hey, I've got this has to be there. But I'm never going to say, all right, tell me what you want and I'll go create it for you. It's, it's all about, we talked about this a little bit earlier. I want to learn about you. I want to learn about your voice. I want to learn about your values, your message, your goals. I want to learn about your audience. I think success in book design occurs at the intersection of you being really proud of it, me being really proud of it, and the market really really appreciating it. Right? If one of those three pieces isn't there, I don't think it's working. Right? There are designers who I won't send you something that I don't love. Right? And one thing that I think I've gotten better at as a designer is if you give me an idea that I don't think is workable, I'm going to tell you. And we're gonna say yes and okay. I see what you're trying to do there, but let's figure out how to make it workable. Back in the day, I used to say sure, whatever, your funeral. But that's not what a great graphic designer does. I don't think so. We'll talk through all those things. I will, generally speaking, I develop a few cover concepts based on all this conversation. I get the questionnaire in, by the way. We'll have a phone call to talk about it, right? I might ask you some questions on it. Generally speaking, I just like to hear people talk, right? And we might do a Zoom or something like that, but that helps so much to understand who I'm designing for, because their personality has to come through on that cover. But again, it has to speak to their market, and it just has to look like a professional book. It has to, it shouldn't look self-published, right? It needs to look great.
And so if you have a business, you also don't want it to look like it's something that's kind of out in left field, right? Like, and I'm not saying it has to be branded, but it does have to be, thoughtful in the umbrella, right? In terms of that.
Sure, yeah, and that's actually one of the things I ask on my questionnaire is, well, how closely does this have to tie into an existing brand? Some people say, yeah, this is like, here's my brand guidelines. Like, there's
okay,
right. But other people say, well, it doesn't have to be strict, but like I want it to have a similar flavor. Right. And then sometimes it's like, it doesn't matter. It's a brand new thing. So it doesn't need to tie into anything. Usually it's the second one. Right. But in any case, so, I'll concept. And then here's the thing. I think great design, one of the qualities of it is it's iterative, right? It shouldn't be, beware of any, there's all those, contest websites and things like that. You'll get 100 designers designing on spec, and you get exactly, and you get to pick your favorite one, and just beware of anybody that makes you choose from options. I actually don't. This is a totally like semantic thing, but I don't like to say the word options when it comes to design, because I don't think that's what I'm giving you. I mean, I'm working with you towards a goal. Options, bad word for me. We will work together to iterate on these designs, right? So I might send you a couple fleshed out cover designs. We're going to work together on one or the other, or if you don't like either, then we'll talk about what's missing and we'll create another one. You know, I don't like to lock people into numbers. You know, I believe it's if the fair is running, you know, I think that just people aren't comfortable and they don't operate as well and they make hastier decisions and that sort of thing. So, you know, design is a process. And I think maybe the banner here is that design is not a product. You know, I think that a lot of people confuse design with a product and not a service or a process or a relationship.
Are you cringing when I say deliverables?
What's that?
Do you cringe when I said deliverables?
No. Okay. I think deliverables are the result of design. You know? So design is kind of like this you know, this process that's driving towards a deliverable. So yeah, you're going to wind up with a book cover, a set of files that are going to be, you know, prepped to, you know, printer specs and all those sorts of things. But, you know, I think to look at it as like I'm paying for a book cover, I'm paying for this, you know, 6x9 creation is not the right way to look at it. I think you have to recognize that you're paying for, or you're investing in a collaboration with a service professional who knows what they're doing and who's going to work with you in this sort of unique way. Because it's not like a plumber either, where you're just like, there's the thing, fix it, right? There's this other sort of ingredient in there, which is like, look, I have to just jump into your brain and create what's in your mind's eye, but maybe better than you could have imagined it. But we have to work together to get to that. And I think that is also something I'd underscore, is that, you know, some authors and some, frankly, some, you know, platforms will convince you that you don't have an important part to play, you know?
It's kind of like, I mean, to me, it's actually, and I told you that when I worked with some self-published, was the, well, you've seen bad covers, but until you've actually worked with somebody who knows how to do good book design, you don't realize all of those pieces and what it takes. And talking about the covers. So like, I don't think people think about the inside of a book as a work of art, right? But amazing thought goes into like the font, right? The layout, how much space, how are you going to set up the chapters, right? Like that's not a dump, you know, that's not a dump and run template, right?
No.
Like that is all, and that's a whole different, to me, like having your brain be able to see that clearly, as well as hold space for that more, I won't say more artistic part, but that more, what was more graphic-y piece. Right. It's also what makes book design such a skill, right? Yeah.
And I hinted at it a little bit earlier. It's this balance of the subjective and the objective. And so you have to be able to, you know, compel and make someone feel something and experience something when they take in your design, but it also has to serve its purpose. It also has to be functional. So I think, you know, sure, a cover there's great encapsulation of that when it comes to like nonfiction covers, right? Because it has to look interesting and compel, but it also has to kind of propose value. But for the layout, there is this, you know, I think to analogize it to web design, they would call it UX, this experience, right? So 100%. I think when you're flipping through a book, you know, and it's not this like, you know, this transcendental experience. It's more like, do I feel good when I'm reading this? You know, I'll never forget ordering a book off of Amazon for, you know, like nothing. I went with like the cheapest. It was like a public domain book. Right. And when I got it, it was a nightmare. It was like just somebody had clearly exported a Word document into like an automatic layout generator thing. And it was just, it hurt to read. So I got through like 5 pages of it and just discarded it because it was not thoughtfully done and it was a terrible experience. And I think, you know, this is something that a book designer is considerate of. You know, they're thinking about that experience. Does it, first of all, do the styles tie to the cover? Does it feel like this sort of comprehensive piece? And then does the flow just kind of put you at ease, or does it encourage you through the book? Again, does it just kind of feel good to either skim through or deep dive?
Right.
We're thinking about all those different things. And then does it, is it technically sound, right? Is it going to bleed off the edge, or is it going to,
Right. But I don't think people think about that. I think they're like, oh, it's just like uploading your picture on the internet. You just upload
yeah,
the book and it's all
right.
there. So I think these are the things as part of your education process. And I just don't think people are so, considerate of. One of the questions, I think you touched upon it, but the difference between the user experience of a printed book and an ebook. You're still, as the designer, responsible for both those experiences, right? Like you're not only focused on the print, you're focused on the e-experience as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And they're different considerations because there are certain things in the print book that will not translate to the ebook. For example, yes, size relationships matter, but things like intentional page breaks.
Right.
Because there are no pages, and if you make your text a little bit bigger in the book, the page breaks all change, right? So there are things like that. I think relational sizing and spacing is what really matters when it comes to the ebook. And of course, just general flow. Does it, and some technical elements like click throughs.
Are you putting in a graph that's going to blow up, that looks totally right here, but in this version?
Exactly. So you're right. There's a new layer to book design that has really kind of cropped up in the past, 15 years or so. And that is in and of itself is a bit of a specialty because there's so many opportunities to take shortcuts. There's upload your PDF and it'll make it into an EPUB, and beware of those things because they're never gonna be clean. They're just not.
Right.
And so it's more important to have it's more important to have somebody who kind of can go into the code and just kind of make sure everything's going to be sound. And so when you do upload, I remember you're trying to put your best foot forward. And the book's a nonfiction book for an entrepreneur or just a thought leader. It's a huge credibility piece.
Right.
And
we sometimes say it's not just. It's a marketing asset in your portfolio of marketing, right? It in and of itself is part of your portfolio.
Yeah, and not only does it behoove you to make it really great, but a bad one has the opposite effect. It's going to repel people. If you're trying to get a speaking gig, and you send a book that looks like it was done for $100, and it's it just kind of looks like a pamphlet that's got all these issues. A booking agent is just going to say, well, I don't know if this is the caliber of individual we want to do business with.
Right.
So
you're asking me for how much for that?
Yeah, exactly. So I just think it's worth investing in. And one of the qualities that defines a great book design, thankfully, is that it's enduring. I think a great book design is going to look great for a very long time. So I believe it's worth getting right now, just putting some time and energy and investing in it. To get it right now, because it'll last you for a very long time and can eventually just kind of become a cash cow for you.
You've that was the finale. Now I was like, no, I'm going to ask you, George, what makes good book design? So you might have to say, repeat that wonderful thing. But for those of you just joining, I'm Nancy Sheed of Sheed Communications. I'm really excited and chatting away, for probably far longer than we should with George Stephens. Of G Sharp Design, and he's a fantastically fun and very smart book designer. And so, George, if people come to you, or again, in your 20 years of doing this, and you got put on the spot, what would you say makes good book design, or what are the things somebody needs to know about book design, right? And this isn't necessarily what's the best trending color, right? But what are the elements you're looking for, or that you're looking for to convey, or you want your author client to walk away with?
Yeah, I think that a couple things that I would like the author client, I like that, to walk away with would be, or to understand up front, is that first of all, book design is a specialty, right? Book design is a process. It's not transactional. It shouldn't be quick definitively. You should have to spend a little bit of time. I'm not saying we have to take years on this thing, but don't expect an overnight turnaround on this. And part and parcel with that is that you need to expect to be involved in it. I think the best projects that I have been a part of are the ones where the author is really hands-on in the right way. They're giving me what I ask of them. Yeah, because I know what you're. There's also hands-on in the wrong way.
Hands-on in the right way. I like that. I know how
right.
to do like avatar for my ideal client.
Yes, exactly. Hands-on in the right way. So yeah, absolutely. I think you just need to consider that you're going to be, that something is going to be asked of you. Your input is invaluable to the process. But, in terms of what makes great book design, yeah, we could get into trends and all those things, and those change over time. But, as I mentioned, I think a great book design endures. I think that is the sort of, the quality that I could assign to a really great book design. Is this going to look great in 5 years, in 10 years, in 25 years? The styles might come and go a little bit, but I think a really sound and powerful design will still make sense, right? As long as the subject matter hasn't completely,
right.
The poles haven't inverted. I think that a really great design is going to stand the test of the time and look, like something that still matters. And I think, the opposite side of that coin is that like ephemeral design is not going, well, definitively not going to last, right? I mean, so I think, to get enduring design, it really does take like a really mindful approach on the part of both the author and the designer. It is a collaboration. It is, I seek to be kind of establish a real relationship with my clients, which sounds a little cheesy, but I really do, because I think, I think that it is just critical. A book is an extremely, a nonfiction especially is an extremely like personal work. It is the sum of all your experiences, and
You're getting some thumbs up on Facebook right now. So you were saying things people are agreeing with. So
excellent.
Right, exactly.
Good to have the affirmation. Well, yeah, I think that I think it's a real tragedy when I see a book with a cover that looks like it was slapped on, or that it was just kind of, pulled out of a competition site or something like that, because I think that so much time and energy is put into the manuscript, the experiences that led to you writing this book,
right.
Everything that led to this moment. And I think it's natural that authors are maybe a little fatigued by the time they get to the design phase. They've been through the ringer.
Wait till they get to the marketer.
I'm just gonna say I can't really complain, because you're
after me. They're like, what? More work?
Yeah. And, I just think you could say the same thing. I mean, this is publishing a really great book that's going to pay for itself, but also serve as this really incredible platform. It does take some work. And there's, it's like anything. There's a reason everybody doesn't have a successful book, because a lot of folks, frankly, are motivated to breeze through it.
Right.
So, I think I would just encourage, any author who's kind of at the precipice of whether it's design or you're just kind of thinking about your publishing process as a whole, just recognize that your words are super important, that your message is super valuable. But I do believe that, the design is going to be the front door to your book. And it's also going to be, the hallway they're walking down. It's going to be that full experience. So it really does behoove you to approach that mindfully and make sure that it's treated in the right way.
I said it so beautifully. I love that. Thank you. And I think that's part of the reason I wanted to just chat more with you, to learn about your process, but again, to educate the authors of all of these pieces, and kind of break down all of these parts. And again, the more informed you are going into this process of getting your book published, the more satisfactory it's going to be. But I think, like, again, even when you and I first spoke the first time, you're like, this guy needs PR. I was like, well, tell me a little more about this PR they're looking for, because again, just like you and creative director, PR versus kind of marketing versus, I want to say we're getting the online foundation ready for launching. And there are all these nuances, but I think the more informed you are as an author, the more you know, and the more that people like us that you may choose to work with can tease that out of you. It just is a far more, satisfactory experience. And I think, just like I was going to ask you the question, when ideally does somebody come to you? Like, does the book need to be completely finished, edited in manuscript form and done? Could they start talking to you when they're in edit mode? What is that in their timeline? When should they start thinking about talking to you if they're not, kind of locked into a publishing house or a,
Sure.
kind of a done for you project?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think, the answer will, of course, be a little unique to your situation, wherever you find yourself and how many rounds of editing that you plan on investing in and that sort of thing. But, for me, I have people come to me with a completely finished manuscript and they're like, I just need to give this thing a body,
right. Right.
But then, quite often I have authors who are building out, maybe they're going through a developmental edit and they're thinking, gosh, I need to have, a graphic suite built for my book. Okay. And I want to have the cover design because the aesthetic that's defined by this cover is going to inform all these graphics, which I think is important. So, if you're doing a book that's going to have a lot of pieces, parts within it that you need to be, custom designed, you need to think about the kind of bigger picture here and the fact that you want those graphics to look and feel like they belong in your book. I mean, sometimes I'll be doing a layout and somebody will say, well, here's some graphics for the book. And it's like this graph from over here and this chart from over here. And I'm thinking, well, let's talk about, refreshing these and making it look like they belong. Right. So, that's a little bit of an all over the place answer. Just kind of, I guess, think about your project. I think it is important to, if I can design your cover before the manuscript's finished, you can start marketing it, right? You can start teasing.
That's where I am. I'm like, give me that cover. Let's get
exactly.
the page up.
So very, very common that I'll have the cover and then, there might be a little bit of a layoff before we start into the manuscript. So, my opinion is really what I typically tell people is as soon as your title is defined, because that is the key ingredient. As soon as you have a title, let's get going on the cover.
And I would say, the sub, things can, this is a digital world, right? Sure. At least get a placeholder, right? Get something 90% there, right? Mm-hmm. And we can, that might make you cringe when I say that, but
no. I agree completely, especially for the subtitle. The main title, because it will potentially be a little more integrated into the design. Typically, if something is going to be integrated into the design in terms of copy, it's going to be the main title. So focusing on that, I think it's a priority. The subtitle, we can piece that in and out as needed. But I do think the earlier the better. Ideally. To get going on your cover is going to serve you better as an author because you can start the hype train, get that going, and then we'll pick up on the manuscript when it's ready.
So it's never too soon to contact George. On that note, George, how for people who want to just sort of follow along or connect with you or learn more about great book design or see samples of your work, what's the best way, or you can list all the ways that you would love for people to find you?
Yeah, I think the best way would be my website is gsharpmajor.com, which is the music key, gsharpmajor.com. And through there you can find, my portfolio, you can find the socials, you can contact me, you can find out more about me. I think that's probably the best place to start. I am somewhat active on Instagram and Facebook. I visit LinkedIn maybe once a month. So, there
are nonfiction book authors there. I'll just
I know. I'm working on myself here. But it all starts at gsharpmajor.com, my website. So take a look at that and see what you think. And yeah, by all means, I'd love to talk to anybody who's exploring the publishing process. And I want to make self-publishing look better. So let me see if I can help with that.
I love that. That is definitely a mission. Well, just thank you so much. I know I told you we typically talk for half an hour, but this was such a treat. Thank you for your time. Thank you. And I think we have to give shout outs to the people who brought us together. So Brooke, to Brooke White, who introduced us, and our friend David Wells, who was the co-project we worked on, which was really exciting. So I hope we have more of those in the future as well, because it was a delight. And again, my job was made easier because you've done all of your great work. So I hope we can do that again in the future.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure, and I can't wait to see the one when Brooke comes on.
Exactly. No pressure, Brooke. No pressure. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks again. We'll see you on the interwebs.
All right. Thanks, Nancy.